Hi, welcome to Link Digital's public forum. We are joined by John Griffin of Open North and Stephen from Link Digital to discuss about data governance for AI and policy implementation. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Without further ado, let's hear it from Stephen and John.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Welcome, John. I'm not gonna do an intro for you. I'm gonna talk about other stuff first. Basically, I'm gonna talk about 2024. Hasn't started yet. Here in Australia, 2024 and every new year doesn't start until after Australia Day, which is tomorrow. Nothing happens between Christmas and the 26th of January. We shouldn't expect anything. We shouldn't plan for anything, and we certainly shouldn't expect anything from me today. Um, with that said, there are some awesome things that we concluded with kind of last year that I think are going to be able to be bounced off of into 2024. Just as a kind of a recap, uh, going to the Canadian Open Data Summit, talking about trust, architecture of trust. Andrew on our team, who's working on our public communications and writing and research stuff, is like just noticing massive amounts of other publications, other discussions, other topics being raised around trust around the world. It's kind of like, in, in chorus with that, we still have this trust issue going in 2024. Is that relevant for a company like Link Digital? I'm not sure. But the challenge for us is to kind of think about what we do with open data, what we do with open data catalogs, and see, is there a way we can help with this obvious issue that people are grappling with, whether it's driven by AI, whether it's driven by just general concern around things like disinformation and misinformation, where it's the general malaise people feel in the way that, the world moves on and they're not quite ready to move on with it, where it seems to be moving in a weird step fashion that's like left, right, forward, backward, and not everyone can kind of like stay in tune with that. What can we do? If we're good at what we do around open data, there might be a crossover. So I think for 2024, Link is going to look into that. We're going to have Paul Walsh, who's just joined us as our CTO, speak at the State of OpenCon in UK in London. And that he'll be there with Jonathan Gray from King's College London, Mark Evans, old school, and other folks from ODI talking about maybe rebooting the idea of what we do around research for data portals. The Canadian Open Data Society, and Lee's on the call, have been looking at the same kind of stuff, canvassing across Canada, looking at different open information catalogs and systems and kind of working out what does that represent. They've got some good work going on there. I personally, I can't actually claim to know, but I personally think there's an opportunity right now for lots of different associations, lots of different projects, lots of different people to kind of come together and kind of switch from advocacy around open data to practice around open data. And it's coming at a time when advocacy or concern or discussion around information, knowledge, how we encode ourselves and the way we live our lives through, experience of stuff hitting us, news, media, social media, education, all that kind of stuff, is being questioned. It's being questioned from the perspective of AI. It's being questioned from the perspective of agency. What is it that we're giving up when we allow technology to kind of drive the way that we come to understand the world and come to integrate ourselves with the world as individuals, as families, as communities. And I've had the pleasure of having John run a draft version of what he's going to talk about today at the lead-in event for the Canadian Open Data Society. And then I had a similar pleasurable moment when Merlin presented the same sort of discussion at the formal event for the Canadian Open Data Society last year. I think it's massively relevant, not just for the folks in this call, but as we distribute this out. How can we actually have like a concept of governance around AI? What are the similarities to things like governance around data? What are the kind of strategic the big issue is pretty much like, how much resource do we have for this? How much cognitive load is this going to throw onto us? How different would these policies be to other existing policies? And if you're a small jurisdiction or you're a small team, you're a small domain, as it were, you're likely to be given this task. You're likely to be within the context of all the other stuff you're doing. Might be general data governance, might be general information management practice, backup, archive, retrieval, alignment with best practices in all these different domains. And then there's this new unknowable, unsure, uncertain domain where your skills are expected, your understanding is expected to have relevance, to be able to be applied. I think we need to kind of rapidly come together and develop that best practice as a cohort. It should be principles led. And where possible, it absolutely should be leveraging, the capabilities we've already got, the processes we've already got in place, the people that we've already got in place. So with that, I will actually cross over to John from Open North. Awesome to have Open North as a partner of Link Digital. We do technical stuff. We build data catalogs. We build web experience stuff, websites, mostly on Drupal, but other things as well. When customers talk to us or clients talk to us about what our advice would be in different areas, it can be a really slippery slope. We could have an opinion, but we don't claim to have like a reasoned, researched, and considered opinion to provide to customers. We're not consultants. Where that space needs to be filled is with organizations like Open North, where they do have that model where they will research, they will consider the organizational structure, they will look at best practices more widely in information management, data strategy, data governance, and come back with practical ways that organizations can implement things. So I hope that's like a good lead in for you, John. Jump in, talk about it. What's up with AI?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. That was an excellent lead in. I just want to quickly check if with Kate, if I'm sharing my screen here or for the presentation. That's easiest.
Yeah, please feel free to share your screen.
Okay. One sec. Bum, bum, bum. All right. Cool.
Yes, we can see it. All
amazing.
good.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Link Digital for giving us the time to be here, and we're really excited for this. So in terms of Steve's introduction there, actually, I think a really good point that kind of sets this off really well is this working together with Link Digital from Open North's perspective. We're really excited about that coming up in the new year, and I think an important thing in terms of distinctions he was making there is that we believe the work that Link Digital does is going to be a really great solution for a lot of municipalities that we work with here at Open North. But that's to say, it's not going to be necessarily the solution for every municipality. And so really what we do is come in and understand the challenges, the problems, the resources, the strengths at the municipal level, try to get a sense of like, what do we need to start considering around solution? And the reason I start with that is because I think, as a lot of you are probably familiar, that's maybe not the approach that a lot of talk around AI has centered around. And so we'll get more into the techno-solutionism later. But it's what makes working with Link Digital so great so far is, we're able to sort of find where each other fits in each other's work. And for us, we're, like I said, really excited to where that's going to be for municipalities in Canada. All right, so now I'll get into the actual presentation itself. So really quickly, for those who aren't familiar with our organization, we're a Canadian nonprofit. I myself am based in Toronto. And we have a mission to advance the common good through the promotion of digital strategy and data governance. So we work directly with organizations, like I mentioned, municipalities and communities, providing learning resources and conducting leading research to contribute towards this mission. Our vision is a future in which governments, civic-focused organizations, and mission-aligned businesses are equipped with digital tools that enable them to advance the common good. Really quickly, you see the common good in there twice. Understandably, for a lot of folks, it's vague. It's something that internally within our organization we always come back to and we always talk about, but it's really good anchor for us in terms of thinking about the different kind of projects we want and the different kind of partners we want to move forward with. All right, and with that, data governance and AI. So I think we can all recognize that workshops like this, webinars like this, the conversation around AI that we're having right now wasn't one that we were having maybe 2-3 years ago. And while you can't put all of the emphasis on that for something like ChatGPT, I think a lot of folks, that was the thing that really got them thinking about AI. Oh, AI is this thing, and to them, really that just meant ChatGPT. So this is one of the first things that in conversations with local government officials, with communities, with organizations that we kind of have to navigate is that AI is incredibly complex. There's vast technological, organizational, and ultimately societal systems that it operates within. And so none of this is within a vacuum. And what we really need to think about then is when we talk about a particular AI tool or system and integrating it within a government, within an organization, what are the impacts they're going to be? And so this sort of gets to some of the other points around, and it's something that I see crop up very often in our work with government is a lot of folks saying, well, government should work like a business. It should be more, really what they mean is they want it to be more efficient and they want it to work faster. There's a lot to unpack in those statements and reasons why maybe that's not always going to be the case. But one of the lines that I heard from a colleague once that I thought really helped frame this for me is government work is edge cases all the way down. And what that means is that when you're working on a project for a government, you can't leave anybody out. So for an AI tool, this means being accessible to 100% of its residents. You can't like implement and then see, oh, actually 3% of the population can't access this, or even worse, 5% of the population's lives are actively made worse by this. Now that may not always be an issue for a company that operates purely on a revenue generation model. Ideally it is, and they do care, but it's a heck of a problem for government. And so this is one of those things that we kind of need to keep in mind as we move forward with like, well, why can't they just implement this tool right away? And you start to understand that government work is incredibly complex and there's a lot of factors to consider. So like I said, when we talk about AI, we can mean a myriad of different things. So yes, ChatGPT, sure. Let's lump it in. Facial recognition, predictive climate software. Like these things all fall under this very large bucket, and that's just getting started. And none of those things are in any way alike, except for, to us, the focus around the need for data. We don't get to simply roll out an AI tool and be like, great, we don't need to worry about it. It's going to do X work. We'll check up on it in a couple of years. It's not how it works. There's decisions to be made around when it's used, how to monitor it, how to audit it, and having these policies in place is crucial. And the key thing that we'll really dive in on this presentation is that these policies work for a large amount of different software, different technology, and you don't need to just think about this in the silo of AI. So decenter the uniqueness of AI. So the decisions we make, the policies we put in place, these apply to more than just AI technology. We should leverage that opportunity to push for strong governance practices throughout organizations. So like I'm saying, your policies around a particular AI tool are likely going to be applicable across different AI tools and across different technologies. Data quality, non-biased outcomes, public oversight, procurement, governance, stakeholder engagement. These are all priorities when we talk about AI tools, but are crucial to how government operates with other digital tools as well. Recentering digital maturity. It's easy to say, well, we need to put in place strategies and policies for ChatGPT right now. That's not wrong, but we need to ensure those are going to be applicable to other technological developments. We're all familiar, tech moves fast. What's popular one day is going to be, on the curb the next day. And we need to be building policies that account for that. And so that we're not continuously making new policies each time. Because I think we've all seen, maybe government doesn't always move the fastest in implementing these policies. And that's going to be especially the case if they're doing a new policy every year, every 2 years. And then, so working from problems to solutions. So this is what I talked about a little bit, building off of Stephen's introduction there. Techno-solutionism is not a way forward. And what I mean by that is choosing a product and implementing it without no solution in mind. So again, we saw a lot of this with ChatGPT rolling out and different organizations like, how can I use this? As opposed to thinking about a challenge and maybe then considering it as a solution. I think what helps is, I don't know about everyone here, but I've attended my fair share of conferences in the day, and you get pitched about a million different solutions, mostly in search of a problem. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Vendors exist there for a reason, and we all have to sort of show up and like, here's what our product is. I think where we start to fall into a trap is when we look at these like shiny new things and we're like, great, how can I, and again, within the context of Open North's work, how can I, at this town of 50,000 people, use smart streetlights? As opposed to thinking like, actually, is that even a challenge that I need to solve for? We've had a lot of conversations with local governments that start with, we want to start using AI, as opposed to, here's our problem, what should we be looking at for potential solutions? Maybe there's an AI tool that's a part of that solution, maybe not. So those conversations, we've taken a lot from that. Like I said, a big part of our work is research. We have a lot of really smart folks who stay up to date on the latest policies, the latest best practices. But equally a big part is the conversations we have with local governments here in Canada. One of the challenges that comes up repeatedly is data governance. And so they might not say, hey, our big problem is data governance. But what they might come up with is, we have huge amount of data sets that are sort of scattered each different way in the wind. We don't know where they are. We know we're not in line with various legislation and policies. What do we do? And so this comes up the same way with the AI. So while I did say like we have some conversations, people are raring to go around AI, we have other conversations with a lot of staff at the local government level who are well aware that maybe like a city councillor, for example, has heard about the magic of AI and really wants to implement it in the city because that's going to get headlines. And they know that the data governance practices in place are not in place yet. And that if they try to move forward on this, whatever AI tool X councillor decides on, they're gonna run into a few problems. Similar, like, again, and this isn't a problem unique to government. I think we've all been in places of work, maybe someone a little higher than us, reads a really interesting article or talks to somebody, and so it comes with like, hey, I want us to do this. And try as you might, you can't explain to them why that's entirely impossible. So this is something that we know is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds at the local government level, and something we're really trying to solve for. One of these other questions, and I'm sure Link Digital has run into this as well, and really any folks dealing with data, is that you don't get to go to government and say like, great, we're talking about data, and then you'll be pointed in about 5 different directions. And so this is particularly the case with data governance. Is I know for us, sometimes it'll be like, oh, you want to talk to records management. Sometimes you want to talk to IT. Sometimes you want to take to the business unit. Because it's no one person's job and it's not structured this way, even in cases where a municipality might have a data governance framework or data governance strategy, operation is a real struggle, because how do you determine those roles, those responsibilities? And that's something we're actively working with municipalities around right now. Okay, great. So data governance for responsible AI. So I'm talking about data governance here, but I do want to stress that we're not suggesting, okay, you have strong data governance practices in place, great, run with AI. It's on its own, it's not enough, but it does contain critical components of AI governance. High-level principles like transparency, auditability, non-biased outcomes, accountability, values aligned, these all need data governance to be operationalized. Also, developing data governance in an organization involves changes in growth to capabilities and responsibilities and culture that support AI governance. Again, we've talked to municipalities who have put in place a data governance framework or strategy without trying to figure out, well, how do we build the capacity of staff to work within this? How do we change the culture? That the culture bit is probably the biggest one, and the most difficult to do. I think as anyone who's tried to enact culture change at an organization on a wide level, it's not an easy task. Data governance also builds capacity to govern emerging tech generally. So this is not just limited to the space of data. And this is key, as we don't know where, like I mentioned, AI is going or what's going to be coming next. So we want to build these capacities to make our governments more resilient to new changes, new developments in technology. Finally, AI governance sounds novel and difficult to implement because of the hype, but data governance does not. By translating data governance language, we make the move to better governance easier to understand and implement. Again, some folks are going to get really excited about the idea of AI and then get lost in the weeds pretty quickly around like what that actually means. Where we've had success is really driving down to like the nuts and bolts of what data governance is and making it really relatively rudimentary for all staff to understand, not just the folks from IT. A really good example of something that we're doing right now is we're working with some municipalities around building data inventories. Again, like a really foundational building block, but is something that is tangible and a lot easier for municipal staff to understand and see. And once you've done that, it's a lot easier to see, like, whether you want to continue going the data governance route, you want to talk about AI, you want to talk about other tech, you want to talk about open data, this is important to build. And it creates that understanding at the staff level and is what helps start to change that culture. So like I mentioned before, we also like to view this through the lens of governing for and governing with. So data governance brings changes that build on the foundation for AI governance, from the ability to make critical decisions around procurement and data collection to the last moments of the AI and data lifecycle. Implementing AI tools requires a tremendous amount of trust between residents and governments. Data governance is one of the ways to build that trust, leveraging mechanisms of transparency, inclusivity, and accountability. So again, similar when we're talking about open data, right? Like putting that data out there and letting people know like, hey, this is what we're working with is a really good first start towards if you want to start bringing in different AI tools. I think it's residents generally want to know, like, what is this based off of? Like, what data does the municipality have on me? These kind of things are really helpful towards, again, like, and I think Stephen touched on this earlier, like in general, we're seeing, I think, slight erosion in trust sort of across the board. So putting these practices in place is really crucial at this moment, and that's being highlighted again in some of the conversations we've had, particularly with municipalities in Canada in, say, more rural areas where maybe trust in government isn't quite as high. So these are the kind of practices you absolutely need if we're going to sort of hold that erosion of trust off. All right, I believe this is my last slide. So a new perspective on data governance for responsible AI. So 6 foundational data governance measures for governing for and with AI. Public education. So how are you teaching and learning from residents? Data sovereignty between residents, government, and private partners. How is this data used, governed? Are all voices represented? Data collaboration. How is data effectively shared across sectors and organizations? This is a really interesting one for some of the work we're looking at with Link Digital. And honestly, where we're probably the most excited going into this year. Data transparency. How open are the data sets used for AI tools? Be familiar with the privacy regulations in everywhere that people are currently right now, but it varies pretty dramatically here in Canada from province to province. So that's one of those things that we've tried to navigate of how do you ensure that you are meeting the laws set forth by your province, but how do you also make sure that in cases where maybe it's not at the level it needs to be, you're still meeting like basic privacy demands from your residents. And that was it. I think I was within the 20 minutes I promised. But yeah, so people feel free to reach out to me via email, or I can also be found on LinkedIn. And also just feel free to reach out to Open North. But otherwise, also Link Digital, because we have a tight and cozy relationship. So I'm sure they can hand folks off to us anytime. And with that, I'll hand it back to Steve.
Yeah, but you're not off the hook because there's going to be questions. I've got plenty, but I don't want to selfishly take up all the time. Oh, we have a question from the Canadian Open Data Society. Is that you, Paul, or is that someone else?
It totally is. Straight from the bed, because I'm just getting over something. So I just got a couple of quick questions, because you've got this experience of working with municipalities, John, and I worked for a municipality once myself in economic development, so I know how they like things to go in their usual groove, like they really like it, and they really like to just hire someone to do anything that takes them outside that groove. And I'm wondering if you have sort of templates for how they can proceed along these 6 lines that you mentioned in your last slide, and whether you do actually take on that kind of work for municipalities. Yeah, that's my question.
Cool. Excellent question. Thank you, Paul. And sorry to hear you're recovering, but I hope you have a speedy recovery. So absolutely, you're right. Like, I think if there's one thing government really hates, it's no one wants to be blazing any trails. No one wants to be taking on any new risks. If you tell someone, like, well, you're the first ones we've heard who are doing that, they're like, oh, we should probably stop then. In terms of templates, that's something that we've struggled with. We've built relatively, like, I would say, like, basic guides around sort of just thinking about some of these projects and some of these approaches, along with sort of my colleague Tom, actually, who I think was one of the ones who spoke at the Canadian Open Data Society, has put a lot of work out there around some of these topics. One of the areas that we struggle with is that even at the municipal level in Canada, there's so much variance in terms of what their challenges are and where their strengths lies and who's going to operationalize these practices. So it is the kind of work we take on. We're trying to, in doing more of it, try to identify what are those common themes across the board that are more like that we can replicate in terms of providing guides and templates. Because ultimately our hope is that it's going to require less work from consultants, including ourselves, to participate, and that it's a little bit easier for municipal governments themselves to manage that. Because for us, that's the common good. So,
well, I tend to find that municipalities, it depends on their scale. Like if they're really big, then it makes a huge difference. But if they're like Wayne Fleet, it's just not going to happen, right? They're just going to outsource it to somebody else if they even feel like doing it at all. And sometimes they give the IT job to their friends rather than someone actually qualified. I didn't say that. Um, but maybe you could start with just taking on the consulting with the public part, and then they feel safer taking that next step, and then eventually you'd have that feedback that you could apply across the board. Just an idea.
no, and it's an excellent one, and we've had some really good conversations with municipalities who have varying approaches around how to interact with the public on these, and there are some organizations that have sort of like entered that foray into like how do you build transparency and honesty with the public around the different AI and digital tools that are being put in place. I think it's still again like it's one that ultimately you want to build off of organizational capacity around stakeholder engagement and resident engagement. And so we're right now in conversation with a few municipalities who have done some really, to us, like innovative approaches around that. It's like, great, how do you take that to a lot of these tech and digital projects and use those same strengths to build that trust? But I think you're right. It's probably the best place to start.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions before I go into like a really long monologue and just stand on the hill and pontificate? All right, here we go. So I love, hate, and adore AI stuff, but mostly because it's just interesting. It's like it's slapping people across the face, not just people but institutions. It's making us pay attention to some things that have probably been kind of under the radar or in the shadows for a long time. The ability for something to build a model of us and then use that model in some manner. Institutions do that. Individuals do that. We make assessments. We build an understanding, fairly or unfairly, about people, and then we act on that assessment all the time. So AI is doing that. AI is one of these sort of like decision assistant type things, or agents, as it were. It could be for good or for bad. My usually when I think about stuff, I think about it with a kind of critical thinking model around a subjective, intersubjective, and objective reality, because I think those things are all different. What we believe or what we think, what we kind of like put into the world through our thoughts, that subjective reality, it is very different to how something like an institution or here at Link, I often call Link the psychopath, because it doesn't think, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't feel. We should never project onto it these sort of human characteristics. Those characteristics come from us by being good people, well-intentioned, all that kind of stuff. But Link itself as a company is a psychopath. Does not care about anything. It just operates in a machine-like manner, consuming things, pumping things out. So yeah, the intersubjective reality of institutions, of our jurisdictions, of our public institutions, and the way we operate. But ultimately, objective reality will always win. So what is the objective reality around something like AI? It doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what our institutions are kind of ready for, are ready to regulate, are ready to kind of like move forward with process, procedure, tools, technology, change management programs. What's the objective reality when it comes to something like AI and how it might affect us? And when I think about that with this, critical thinking model, I think of economics. So Paul talking about economics again reminded me of that. in economics, we have like, these crazy axioms or crazy assumptions or crazy sort of like rules that we go by to say, yep, we'll have market operators, market agents with some sort of rational way of assessing pricing, some sort of reasoned approach to that. And then we build like this whole study around it. I think with AI, that's where we're going to have to get to. We're never going to know the true full effect of how AI will become agents within our societies, affect us as individuals, how we become attenuated to the technologies that actually are supported by AI. But we do need to get to some sort of like intersubjective belief about how we would study this. And for me, what that means is the ultimate end game around data governance and AI governance will be kind of like democratic. It'll be like, don't let any one thing that should have any one piece of sort of like effect or influence get too big. It'd be like any competition in market dynamics. Make sure that no AI model with its own model of reality is so pervasive, so able to get into something too powerful that we can't really assess that it's bad. Be like, we don't want dictators. We don't want totalitarian states. We don't want toxic workplaces. We don't want bad corporate behaviors that are like destroying our environments, all that kind of stuff. The reason why we know that we don't want that is because not all leaders, not all corporates, not all operations are run that way. So we can kind of like fairly assess across the spectrum of what operations are occurring to say, yes, we want more of that. Let's regulate towards having more of that and less of this bad thing. So yeah, pontificating. Trade operations basically is how we kind of manage economics. How do we do that? I think with AI, the thing that is a little bit different is it's knowledge operations. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that within the kind of IT and information space, everything's largely been objectively verifiable. We've been able to measure things like down to the data level and assess with some analytical sort of certainty whether things are good, bad, up, down, left, right, whatever it might be, in the spectrum, out of the spectrum, probabilistically on track, all this kind of stuff. So all of our best and worst behavior, all of our silliness, all of our greatness, and the way we've etched ourselves into things that AI can be trained on, that's what AI will kind of become. So I don't know, it's almost like the governance of AI is going to come back to the governance of ourselves. We have to be better people. We have to be better societies. We have to be better companies. We have to have better markets. We have to be more equitable. We have to protect the environment. We have to do all these things much, much better because that's the model upon which our assisted systems will have to be based on. And if we don't do any of those things, then our assisted systems will just say, oh, you like to do this. You like to do this thing that doesn't really actually have a good outcome. I can help you with that.
You're basically just describing YouTube there.
Yeah, pretty much. The mashup of someone's reaction to someone's mashup. Yeah, it's turtles all the way down. That was awesome. I think it is amazing that we do have this opportunity as teams, as jurisdictions, as folks involved in IT, as folks involved in open data. This magic opportunity right now to be looking at things like AI, and for folks, like in that Spider-Man sort of like meme, they're all kind of pointing around who's going to take responsibility. And it kind of comes back to people like us. It comes back to those who have worked with information, who have worked with technology, and kind of put in place governance models around the systems to do knowledge operations. because yeah, fundamentally that's the space that AI plays in, or that's what people see it as. Yeah, I can see Lee's got a question. I'm going to put him on the spot, even though he doesn't have his hand up. I'm just guessing.
Usually I do, but if we're playing hot potato, can I toss the potato? That's my
Of course.
question. Perfect. You know what? I'm going to throw it at my executive director. Yeah, if I can go back, throw it back at Paul.
Oh, honestly, when it comes to this sort of thing, I'm still in listening mode.
Okay, to be fair, we have another member here. We can see if he's paying attention. Eugene is here from the Canadian Open Data Society. Have to throw him under the bus too, but misery loves company.
I apologize. Yeah, I'm actually with family right now, so I was listening in, but I don't think I can talk.
No worries. Good to see your name there, Eugene. Yeah, look after your family. I'll give a couple of updates, right? So I mentioned earlier that we've got Paul, who's just joined as our CTO. So what's cool about that is he was the, I think, Chief Product Officer for Open Knowledge Foundation for a long while. Short stint as the CEO there as well during a transition phase. Has been involved with CCAN and has been involved with the open data space and generally been involved with kind of like the open source, open innovation sector for a long time. One of the things that I'm hoping for personally, but Link Digital is a psychopath. I've just explained that. But my personal motivation is that someone like Paul coming into the company will open up some opportunities for us to kind of coalesce on projects that are not just about the normal business model of a company like Link Digital, not just about servicing people's needs around building data portals. We'll always be doing that because that's what pays the bills. But the opportunity to like really investigate this knowledge economy, this knowledge operation space, things like AI, and provide some really good services back into it. I think we have that kind of on the horizon now. The discussion that would be occurring at the State of OpenCon, I kind of think that might, through 2024, be a really great way for folks within the community to all come together. It's around something that we've cared about for a long time, open data portals. I personally, maybe with a lot of bias, have cared about them. But at the research effort that we could kind of put back into data portals, I think now is a great time to do that. I get the sense that we should be able to define or kind of create a definition of the conformity of something like what should a portal look like? What should be the functional characteristics in terms of how it supports its jurisdiction, how it supports transparency, how it supports innovation, and then do an assessment of the portal. So rather than being kind of like, let's assess the portals and find out what we can find out, like this epistemological dilemma, let's actually be a bit more prescriptive and say, this is what we want, this is what we desire, this is what society should be about. Because again, things like AI slapping us across the face, we need to be more prescriptive. If we don't prescribe what we want as a society, as a bunch of technocrats and good doers, we won't actually have a direction to move in. And I think that research element around open data portals can kind of go in that space. So Paul's at the State of OpenCon talking about that with Jonathan Green and a bunch of other people. The other thing I just sort of mentioned is I'm still super proud of the work that we've been doing around our public communications at Link. I don't know. It's just awesome. We've got Andrew Nettie writing some really good articles. There's a couple that are up there more recently around the Australian data and digital strategy and kind of responses to that, or a summary of that. One thing I thought was pretty interesting is they have they kind of like have a measurement metric around the efficacy of open data, and they put the old trope in there of number of open data sets as the way they'd measure that. And I guess, as a lot of folks on the call would know, that's pretty old school. It's not about the number, it's about the quality. So there are a couple of holes in the data and digital strategy at the federal Australian government level that are worth filling in and sort of pointing out. But it is great generally for the Australian government to be paying attention to this stuff. I think it is the result of some of this face slapping that I think is going on. Reality bites. Similarly, Australia's got the NAP3, National Action Plan number 3. A lot of people who started at the same time as us are up to number 5, but we're up to number 3 due to delays and misstarts. And it'd be great to have that roll through over the next year or two. I'm hoping that we would build upon that. That would be the baseline of a reinvestment in open government here in Australia. And generally, I think the strategic direction of open government partnership generally is looking more like a collaborative approach. I think some of what they've put forward as the strategic objectives moving forward are less about this sort of like tallying system between jurisdictions and more about collaboration between jurisdictions. And I think that is almost certainly what we need. We're seeing policy developed around things like AI in the European Union. We always will see policy and standards being developed in the US and elsewhere, but the human practices matter. Unless you've got people actually practicing things in the same sort of way across multiple jurisdictions and multiple geographies, you don't kind of get a common practice. And kind of with that, it might be a bit premature, but I would float that now might be a really interesting time to consider doing something around, well, the Canadian Open Data Society, for example, right? Great entity, but can we do something at more of the international level? We do have strong advocacy organizations that still are in the space, so Open Data Institute, Open Knowledge Foundation, and others. But advocacy is not practice. It's not like the Institute of Engineers or the Australian Medical Association. It's not, the regulation, certification, and best practice sort of like tick in the box. The space is still populated with advocacy-orientated organizations. And one of the things I suspect, but I'm not fully committed to the idea, is that we have the opportunity right now to move towards practice. I think a focus on practice and the way we approach data portals aligns with what I was talking about with the research. An international sort of like cohort of different associations, individuals, like-minded organizations, good government entities working on the same thing might be really, really cool. But I can see Paul's got his hand up because that probably triggered him.
A little. Well, it's funny you should mention a swing towards practice and certification and well, I wouldn't go so far as regulation, but the other two things, I mean, I can't say too much at this stage except stay tuned because I'm trying to pull together a meeting this coming Monday, actually, on advancing our exploration efforts in that area. We've done a lot of work so far, but it's just we got to. I always feel more comfortable when I got a group together from a whole bunch of different, practices of open data to sort of, gut check what we're going to do before we do it. And that's what next Monday I hope will be all about. So stay tuned. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, cool. Well, that sounds awesome. Well, there you go. I've done it again. Talked about trust at the Canadian Open Data Summit, and then suddenly everyone's talking about trust. Now I've talked about being something together in more international space. Just responding to Paul, one of the things I'd suggest is if you look at the Global Data Barometer and the regional hubs that kind of put forward, one of them, I'm sure, is the Pacific communities. So one of our clients here at Link Digital, they were put forward as the regional hub for the Pacific, inclusive of Australia and New Zealand. Those folks are awesome. Those folks are committed. Those folks understand the business and social value of open data. How it supports research programs, how it supports good economic policy, good political, well, I wouldn't say political, but various policies, fisheries and whatnot.
Sure.
And yeah, they've been great advocates. So those sorts of institutions, I think, are prime for signing up to something like that.
I think our partners in this endeavor do have those relationships in particular. Like we have some, of course, they've spoken at our summits, but they in particular have relationships with like Global Data Barometer and so forth. So maybe I'll circle back with you to make sure we are sharp in our reaching out to them.
Yeah, cool. So I want to do a call around. Any more questions for John? Because I feel like I kind of like overshadowed and did my whole monologue thing, but well, for those who are interested in how data governance can transition and segue into AI governance, the similarities, the approaches, definitely reach out, as John has mentioned, to himself, to the general contact at Open North, or to us at Link. Kevin, Phil, anyone here at Link, absolutely happy to chat to you about that kind of stuff and put you in the right direction with John and others. And I think with that, we're ready to wrap. Is that right, Kate?
That is correct.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Thank you to everyone for joining, especially folks in Canada where it's mid to late evening. Thank you heaps. And yeah, don't go outside unless you're fully rugged up. I understand it's very cold there at the moment.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, John. And by the way, everyone, once you leave the Zoom meeting after this, there is a survey that will prompt on your screen. So please feel free to respond to that and suggest for any suggestions on the topic for this year's public forum. Don't worry, it's truly fully anonymous.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Kate. Thank you, John.
All right.
All
Thank you so
John,
much,
everyone.
everyone.
Ciao,
Have
ciao,
a
ciao,
nice
ciao,
day.
ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.